So tell me, how grave are your concerns about the impact of not banning smartphones in classrooms?
We know the damage that smartphones are doing in classrooms up and down the country. Only 11% of schools have a full smartphone ban in place in secondary schools, and DfE's own evidence, the Department for Education's own evidence, show that half of GCSE classes are being disrupted every single day. This is an absolute crisis. We need to fix it, and the consequences of not acting are very grave.
Would you say this is a personal mission?
Absolutely. I am on a mission to get this sorted. I really care about this and I want to get this done. Now, I know we are a diminished force in Parliament, but we've already shown with the schools bill, but by making a lot of noise about this, by campaigning hard and being right on the policy and evidence side, we can make a difference. We stopped the government capping teachers' pay. We've already made them U-turn on the national curriculum being applied to certain types of schools, and I really want them to see sense on this and accept a ban on smartphones in schools for under 16s, because we know the difference it will make to children up and down the country, and I passionately believe that I will keep going until we see some changes.
And under the Tories, they brought in guidance,
Yes.
which you've said and admitted it hasn't worked.
Yeah, it's made some changes. So, for example, the Ormiston Trust, we know, made changes after the guidance was introduced. There are certain schools who have done this and have seen fantastic results and are evangelical about it. But what we know from the evidence is that this isn't happening in enough schools. So whilst we should also always be careful, look at the evidence before we legislate, we've tried guidance has not been effective, and so we need to take this next step and make it law.
And what would be the ramifications for for teachers of, let's say the ban comes in and they're not implementing it?
It's the same for any there's lots of statutory guidance in schools. It is followed by head teachers.
But when it comes to a ban, so legislating for a ban and that being enshrined
Yes.
in law,
So
what would be the
that
ramifications?
that then becomes, if it is in law, then it has to be followed by schools. That is the same for a number of existing duties.
But if they didn't follow it, what happens
it's
then?
the same as consequences for not following the national curriculum, which they're required to do if they're local authority schools, or in many other cases that is what happens.
Would you potentially want to see that linked to, let's say, like Ofsted ratings?
Yes, of course. Well, if it's something which is in law that they have to follow, that will be something that Ofsted would look at.
Okay. And in terms of so if the ban were to come into force, that would apply to at school, but would you want to see kids off their phones even at lunchtime on their way to school? Because it's...
The whole point about what we're trying to do is make sure that the smartphones are not in schools at all during the day. That includes break time, lunchtime, between lessons. How teachers implement that, so whether head teachers choose to have a phone pouch, or whether in some cases they decide not to let any smartphones on site whatsoever, will be up to them. And it is really important that they have that flexibility, because then we know that that's something the head teachers are asking for. But the fundamental drive behind this is that smartphones need to be not present on the school site at all during the school day. And that is not about having them in bags, because we know that that does not work. You know, that still provides a distraction. We know children are still going to the toilets to use their phone. We know it's buzzing during lessons and they're not concentrating on their work. We know that they're under a huge amount of pressure to respond to social media messages during the day if they have their phone on them. So that is why it's very, very important that we've made the distinction between some schools who say they've got a ban at the moment, but actually kids have still got their phones on them, to what we're calling for, which is no smartphones at all on children during the day.
And how does that work practically? Because a parent might be listening to this who gives their child a phone for kind of safety and at the kind of the start of a school day and things like that. What would you say in that case? Would there be provisions for having the phone with the kid, or do you think how do you do that?
Partly that is why we've given head teachers the discretion for how they implement this, whether it is handing them in at the beginning of the day and then they are not allowed them back until the end of the day, or not on the school site at all. But particularly on the safety point, I did a roundtable with a group of year 11s at a London school, and actually that is a school that doesn't allow children to have phones on site at all. They're not allowed to take them into school. And one of the things that one of the boys said to me there is that he feels so much safer since that has been in place, because actually people around know that those young people have not got phones on them. So they have been targeted way less after school. They feel much safer travelling on public transport when they're in their uniforms. So yes, I understand parents need to understand where their children are. There are lots of ways of doing that. You know, air tags. You can talk about dumb phones. There's lots of other ways of doing this. But a smartphone, we know, is so damaging. And part of the reasons that I want to do things like this is to talk about the dangers that are available to children by giving them these smartphones during the day, both in terms of their academic attainment, but also in terms of bullying, the type of content that they'll be accessing. It's really important that parents realise that this is a step forward for children's safety.
And on that, an NSPCC report which has come out says social media features are subliminally encouraging young girls to increase their online networks and activity, and often at the expense of their own safety.
Yes.
So I imagine you, especially as a parent, would have grave concerns around social media more broadly as well.
Yes, absolutely. And this is why it is really important in a school environment that they don't access this. Right. I've talked already about the bullying issues that take place and the distraction issues. But equally, there's a lot of unsafe content for young people on phones, and social media is just not safe for young people. And as a result, children are accessing things that they just shouldn't be. They're being exposed to things that they just shouldn't be. And so I'm really pleased we're having a conversation about social media as a whole. But I know for certain that a very good first concrete step that we can make is to stop phones being in schools. If we do that, we remove and reduce the smartphone use overall. Studies have shown that. And it also means that children can concentrate in their classroom, and there is an area where they are totally safe. And
I also know, I think you're a mum of 3.
Yes.
And I think they're younger,
little, yes.
but they're edging up. They'll get older.
Yes.
How are you parenting smartphones and social media in your house?
Well, because I know so much about the damage that is done, because I've spoken to experts, brilliant people who have been working in this space, like Jonathan Haidt, for so long, and sounding the alarm about what is happening to our children and what we've allowed to happen to our children. I am acutely aware of the dangers that are there for young people. Now, as you said, my children are quite little at the moment. They're 8 and 6. But I have been extremely clear with them that they are getting a smartphone when they are 16 and not any earlier. I think that's going to come across some resistance, but what I'm hoping is by the time my children get older, that the social norm has changed, that it is not a given that you give your child a smartphone when they go to secondary school, that parents do wait that little bit longer. And part of that is saying they're not going to be allowed it in schools to reduce that social pressure that so many parents are under. And I totally get it's really tough. But if we can shift that norm so that parents don't give children that smartphone until they're that bit older, it will make such a difference to protecting childhood, protecting young people's space, promoting them in their academic attainment, and also making sure that they are not exposed to some of the dangerous things that you can be exposed to on smartphones.